know-how, which were at the core of what is one of our most classified and sensitive defense programs, in order to build a fully sovereign Australian submarine industry, a move one nation can only consider with a deeply trusted partner. To ensure, three, that this program would maximize Australian industrial content, boost the Australian capacities and jobs. On our proposal, a legally binding target of 60% was set, a totally unprecedented example in Australia's defence procurement industry. I insist on the absolutely unprecedented and largely underrated dimension of this partnership, the extent, sensitivity of what France committed to transfer was never done before. When you agree to transfer the technology of your own national core defense capability, which are vital elements of your national deterrence force, and not merely a black box, you entrust your partner with vital elements of your own national security. There can't be a stronger sign of confidence. You can only do that if you have received full assurances that whatever happens, there will be full mutual transparency and trust. This was the extent and strength of our mutual commitments. And it explains a lot in the current situation. The attack class program was always far more than a contract. And this was well known by the Australian government. Several ministers have served since 2016, and they knew. As an unprecedented act of trust, it was bringing our relationship with Australia to a level never reached before, politically and technologically, fully complementing Australia's and France's historical alliance with the US. Indeed, the future submarine program was a full tripartite program involving, for a very substantial share of its budget, Lockheed Martin, provider of the combat system. With the full transfer of such highly sensitive capabilities, Australia was gaining direct sovereign control of one of its vital tools of defense. A stab in the back. On September 16th, this Australian government abruptly announced the cancellation of the future submarine program. This decision had been deliberately kept secret for months, even years, we're told. Even as the French President, the French Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defense, countless high-level working groups, as provided by the Intergovernmental Agreement, myself on the ground, were engaging regularly in good faith with our interlocutors. One can always try to tell afterwards that we should have understood by ourselves, that some ambiguous Australian government attitudes should have made us realize. In fact, we should have been able to read in coffee grounds. This is fiction. What is a hard fact is that still on the 30th of August, French and Australian Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Defence held a ministerial 2+2 dialogue, and they agreed a joint communiqué. It was readily available to the public and was widely acclaimed for its strength and ambition. It encompasses, agreed by both sides, the following sentence: the two countries underline the importance of the future submarine program. Do you agree on such a communiqué when there is the slightest doubt on something so massive as the official backbone of your cooperation? Maybe on Mars, but not that I know on this planet. And probably the reason for which the Australian government did not want to be explicit was frankly explained by the Prime Minister himself on the 16th of September. I quote, "There was never, ever, any certainty that the long and painstaking AUKUS process would result in where we are now. And indeed, if we were unable to access this technology, then the attack class submarine is the best conventional submarine that we would have been able to utilize." In fact, confronted with the high uncertainties which are not finished, surrounding the likely closure of an alternative deal. It was necessary to keep the possibility to continue the future submarine program. And so it was mandatory to keep us in the dark or on the back burner. The deceit was intentional. And because there was far more at stake than providing submarines, because it was a common agreement on sovereignty, sealed with the transmission of highly classified data, the way it was handled was plainly a stab in the back. France knows very well the meaning of sovereignty. We have exemplified countless times the value we attach to such notion. And it was exactly because of this, because of our shared history, because we are two neighboring Indo-Pacific nations sharing the same challenge, that France answered the call of Australia when it wanted to build a sovereign industry. This was at the core of our alliance as inked in 2017. Of course, the Australian government makes its own decision when it comes to national security. President Macron restated that very clearly. But the way this Australian government decided to turn its back on our solemn and far-reaching partnership without ever frankly consulting with France, when there were countless opportunities, without having shared frankly and openly its thoughts, or without having looked for alternatives with France, is just out of this world. With solemn promises and acts, we were supposed to develop a joint approach in the region for the next 50 years. What, after such events, can any partner of Australia now think? Is this the value of Australia's signature and commitment? Renegating on its commitment was a unilateral act from this Australian government, a conscious decision, and it is its historical responsibility. Alarm bells should have rung to the likely consequences. And if it was the case, and they did ring, and they were disregarded, it's even worse. I have seen the comments already made by many former, highly experienced Australian diplomats. These are not things which are done between partners, even less between friends, especially in view of the strong historical ties that exist between our people and citizens in this region, and also in front of the peoples of the region. Setting the record straight. Naval Group's impeccable commitment. The most recent nuclear-propelled submarine produced in the world, the Barracuda submarine, is top of its class, with groundbreaking technologies allowing remarkable performances in terms of range, stealth, and lethality. Naval Group's capacity to provide an excellent product is obvious, proven, and unquestioned. The Australian Prime Minister himself acknowledged it without ambiguity on the day AUKUS was announced, and I quote him: "The attack class submarine is the best conventional submarine that we would be able to utilize, and we remain of that view." Further adding, "The attack class is a great submarine, and Naval Group is a great organization to deliver such a submarine." It is important to set the record straight about Naval Group's impeccable commitment, as there are undeniable proofs of that. In the Senate, some days ago, Defense Secretary Greg Moriarty stressed in writing that the public discussion around the attack class submarine had been largely inaccurate. He added, "The total estimated cost of the program was the same estimate that we took to government in 2016. And he squarely concluded there was no cost blowout." This was further explained during the discussion with the senators. Defense General Manager of Submarines, Rear Admiral Greg Samet, stated, I quote, "No, there was no blowout in the cost of the program. The program cost estimate that was reviewed again this year in accordance with the normal processes under our contract, where we continually review the program cost estimate, remained within the total acquisition cost estimate that we announced in 2016. The budget of the program was exactly the same as it was on the date that the contract was signed. It was within the 50 billion in constant dollars. The program was acceptable, affordable, and compliant. Let me repeat. The attack class was affordable, acceptable, compliant, on bilaterally agreed terms, despite the heavy blow of COVID, with no cost blowout. When some still try to throw mud at it in an attempt to justify themselves, this unequivocal, precise statement made in front of Parliament with all the solemnity it supposes vindicates the reputation of the program. But why was this not done much before? We had questioned the Australian government several times over the years about the false or misleading allegations which were regularly made with scarce official response. We were told that such things do occur in Australia, are normal, do go away, and have to be managed solely by defense. But in light of the subsequent events, the question now arises legitimately. Why was it impossible earlier to state the naked truth, as was done just some days ago, on record during Senate estimates? This would have set the record straight and stopped the smear campaign. In retrospect, knowing what we know for sure today, and I thank the press for having revealed many details, about the relentless conduct in parallel of an alternative plan, some had a direct interest to sabotage the public support and understanding for the attack class program. Some say the program had few friends. What is sure is that a lot was made to be sure that it would have less, including by allowing, I quote, a largely inaccurate public discussion to happen unchallenged. The attack class program, despite the allegation made in this intensive smearing campaign, was in fact not at all a troubled program. There are others that are, and are stunningly attracting little attention and reaction. The attack class program has been intentionally vilified to become an easy scapegoat to justify the change of footing that was long time in the making. The situation worlds apart from the experience shared by all those on the ground. As stated by an official letter of the Commonwealth of the 15th of September, all gates have been totally and satisfactorily cleared, and they recommended the signature of the next phase of the contract. A different decision was taken, political, but in no way it has any single technical ground. I seize this opportunity to reiterate my public appreciation. I've made it earlier. I use this opportunity to do it. For the outstanding and professional quality of the cooperation that has existed for several years between the French teams and the women and men of the maritime program teams of the Commonwealth of Australia. They never used double language. I understand also that despite being the only submarine experts in Australia, they were not in the loop of the secret plan, which might explain the giant leap into the unknown. The Australian government is abandoning a solid cooperation with well-established parameters for a yet unspecified project without even a solid transition. A mere project of a project. Not even the length of the study is certain. Let's be clear. Even if it was prepared in a clumsy manner, we wish well to the new program. Good luck, wished President Macron. We have at heart the interest and security of the Australians, fellow Indo-Pacific neighbours, and friends. France and Australia's common interests are well established, long-term and long-enduring. But it is not enough. But it is enough to read the converging contribution of the most sensible experts in Australia to sense their anxiety. All their questions are justified, and there are many more coming. First of all, There are many doubts on the possibility for the new program to be ever conducted in Australia. Let's state the fact. When the attack class program was fully Australian-owned. Second, the costs are likely to skyrocket, and it has already been officially acknowledged. Third, it appears that there will be a capacity gap, maybe of up to 20 years. When the future submarine program was delivering its first submarine fully made in Australia in the early 2030. Several would have been produced before the first eventual new type of submarine will have been produced. Magical thinking will not change the facts. Conducting a nuclear submarine program and maintaining it requires specific infrastructures and skills. It represents a daunting challenge in terms of material, regulatory, and human investment. A very steep learning curve. We know this by experience, as all nations with deep knowledge in this sector. There are no shortcuts without exposing the crews living alongside the reactors and the civilian population nearby to considerable risk. In fact, such level of uncertainty hardly seems compatible with the urgency and the needs described to justify scrapping the attack class program. And there could have been a different outcome. As you know, France is the only European country to have developed in a totally sovereign manner both a submarine industry and nuclear propulsion technology, and one out of only 4 in the world. It is so very remarkable in this context that since March 2020, this Australian government has never consulted with us at any level, at any time, about a possible nuclear-powered option or the merits of nuclear propulsion. When it was Australia that asked France to transform an original nuclear-powered submarine, the Barracuda class, into a diesel-electric conventional one. And now I'm quoting the experts. Was it so urgent to totally renounce to a regionally superior solution which was ready at hand, to fill the capacity gap for which the Australian taxpayer has already invested? Was it so urgent to immediately renounce to building a national sovereign capacity that would have helped Australia to immediately develop expertise and human resources in order to be able to secure for Australians the best substantial share of the possible new program, if there is any? All the more that the attack class was developed on the design of the latest French nuclear-propelled submarine, ensuring there would have been strong commonalities, even with other projects, in the skills required and a natural transition contributing to save years of unnecessary delays. Was there a hurry to jump into what is widely acknowledged is a totally unknown, with so much speed, spectacular marketing, but no concrete answers? Maybe, as mentioned by a prominent and knowledgeable Australian specialist, there were then elections looming. Politicians and elections make an interesting mix. What is sure is that the decision to cancel the deal will have practical consequences for our local partners. Australian jobs and creating a sovereign capacity for Australia were indeed a key guaranteed benefit of the attack class program. Our thoughts are with the 300 Nava Group Australian employees and their families in Adelaide, as well as with the 50 Australian families currently in Cherbourg, in France. They are facing a precarious situation. But it is 1,000 jobs more who have been trashed with this decision. In 2 years' time, in 2023, when the first Australian steel was planned to be cut, these numbers were planned to rapidly grow to reach 2,300 by 2030. A number that would have been even larger with the jobs created in SMEs and contractors. These would have been highly qualified jobs, requiring high skills, well paid, and long-lasting, as the program was creating a sovereign capacity in Australia, not a one-off assembly line. Recruitment campaigns were underway. Apprentices were regularly auditioned and pre-selected. This has been put to an abrupt end. And Naval Group Australia is also just one element of a broader picture. That includes so far 195 Australian contractors, large as well as SMEs. Without mentioning the numerous SMEs who had registered interest for the planned later stage. Several believed in the political commitments that was publicly made by the Australian government. Several even invested in advance for the announced future development stages of the program. Certainty has been traded off for eventualities. The termination of the attack contract is a hard blow for the Australian defence industry in general and for the South Australian economy in particular, which has severely been torpedoed. You know, we had established over the years very strong bonds with the universities there in the research sector, establishing high-tech laboratories. Deep connection had been created between Brittany and South Australia. We deeply feel for our friends in Adelaide, in Port Elizabeth, elsewhere. As it is now widely admitted that beyond the initial spin of communication, it is highly unlikely that there would be any tangible replacement soon, if any. Finally, the AUKUS submarine component could have also implications in terms of our common efforts to strengthen non-proliferation norms. The further development of highly enriched uranium naval propulsion programs goes against decade-long and costly international efforts, led notably by the United States, to reduce stocks of highly enriched uranium around the world. The new prospect, therefore, entails very specific responsibilities for Australia, which will be scrutinized by the international community. Reconciling this project, if it goes to fruition, with the imperatives of nuclear non-proliferation will be a long and complex job, adding a new layer of complexity. To summarize, these new developments are all the more concerning as the deteriorating strategic environment in the Indo-Pacific regions would have made it necessary to reduce uncertainty and not to increase it. France will always be a close and loyal friend of Australia and the Australians. No artificial wedge, despite attempts, can be put between our people. If there is a problem today, it is with certain aspects of the Canberra bubble and its secret cities practices. But as an Indo-Pacific nation, a neighbor, which has developed a clear vision of where it stands, the challenges it faces, the solutions it could bring, and the partner it needs, France will be always available to Australia when times come, ready to have an active and frank dialogue. And there are many reasons for that. The first one, geography has not changed. France, as a leading European country, as an Indo-Pacific nation, will continue to actively engage, to protect its citizens and its interests, and to work jointly with its allies and partners. France was the first European country to adopt an Indo-Pacific strategy, and Australia was, alongside countries such as India and Japan, taking also into account the centrality of ASEAN countries, identified as one of the main partners. The French president laid the foundation of our Indo-Pacific strategy in this very country. During a speech he delivered in May 2018 on the Garden Island naval base, a lot of symbols. In face of the great challenges of this region, France is determined to use its experience and resources to be a stabilizing force, promoting the values of freedom and rule of law. Our ambition for the region remains unchanged, for it is a matter of preserving our core national interest also, and the one of our closest like-minded partners. Without naivety, we are acutely aware of the strategic consequences of the rise of China and its multifaceted implications. But we have an all-encompassing approach and do not wish to prioritize military confrontation. France played a leading role in ensuring the adoption of an ambitious EU strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, presented on September 16th. It's a symbol. Its central message is that the EU is ready to step up its engagement in and with the region. The recent elevation of its relationship with ASEAN to a strategic partnership shows that this commitment is acknowledged by regional partners. As France will take over the EU Council presidency in the first semester of 2022, we will actively work with our partners, taking new initiatives for the concrete implementation of this ambitious strategy. In this context, we deeply regret that the AUKUS announcement stands in stark contrast, especially in the way it was engineered, with Australia's alleged intent to seek greater involvement by European allies in the Indo-Pacific region. Second, at a time of increased uncertainty, France is the only European country with permanent and significant assets in the Indo-Pacific region and a capacity to rapidly step up its presence. We are not talking about an episodic role or trade promotion-like missions without substantial follow-up. We are talking about our long-lasting presence in the region. 7,000 French military personnel are permanently deployed in the Indo-Pacific. In the Pacific Ocean only, 3,000 of them are stationed on 2 sovereign bases, with 7 ships and 16 military aircraft permanently deployed. Outside the US, no other Western country has such a long-established, diverse, efficient network. These troops and sovereign bases protect our territories and maritime areas, but they also ensure our capacity to permanently be able, for ourselves or in support of our allies, to deploy and act in the region. That has become the world's strategic and economic center of gravity. Just to give you a few concrete examples of the additional operations we have been undertaking these last 12 months in Australia's neighborhood. Deployment, exactly 1 year ago, of a nuclear attack submarine in the Indo-Pacific, the Emerald, including a port visit in Australia. Deployment of an amphibious group all the way to Japan, which jointly operated with the Australian Navy in the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. A squadron of Rafale fighters with their full supporting gear of support and supply planes, deployed from France to Hawaii and Polynesia. On top of the numerous multilateral exercises in the regions, we are conducting freedom of navigation crossings in the South China Sea at least twice a year. We permanently train and enhance our ability to be a stabilizing force in the region, on our own and with our allies. For those interested, I can provide you the record of our yearly missions going back several years. We are usually not boasting of them. The idea is to be credible, efficient, and constantly present and ready, not to show off and then disappear. And this presence allows us to assist civilians against natural disaster and health crisis. As friends and neighbors in this sensitive region, we know the importance of effective solidarity. And I'd like to insist on this last aspect, because there is also another massive security challenge looming, which requires immediate action: climate change. Let's unite to make Glasgow a success. A key pillar of our Indo-Pacific strategy, and the one also of our European friends, is our commitment to common goods and the fight against climate change. France has always been at the forefront of climate change negotiations. Climate change is already an existential threat for hundreds of millions, here in particular in the Pacific. We are hearing regularly the poignant pleas of our Pacific brothers and sisters. Palau, Nauru, Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, Vanuatu, PNG, to name just a limited number. It is also true here in Australia, a place I am proudly calling my second home. The bushfires, the droughts, the floods and their human casualties, they are the price of inaction. Climate change is a unique global threat which requires global solution with every nation utmost best effort and contribution. Climate change does not stop at your doorstep, neither of that of a single country. Pretending it is just denial. Each nation is responsible in its action towards its neighbors, towards the entire world. Our words are hollow and empty. Yes, we all have to make sacrifices. Yes, these sacrifices will be costing us some comfort. But it is an opportunity for change, innovation, progress, ensuring also peace and stability. Glasgow is a wake-up call for responsibility. It's not too late to act. This call is brilliantly answered in Australia by millions of Australians from all walks of life, both in regional and urban Australia, with no artificial divide. All generations united, taking action, inspiring others. This call is, for example, actively relayed by the National Farmers Federation, by the major industry bodies, by several states, in particular New South Wales and Victoria and the territories. Their commitments and actions already launched are impressive, but they all say it is not enough. Their call is unequivocal. Individuals, entrepreneurs, local governments, companies need direction, certainty, in order to adapt, to invest, to unleash the formidable energy of our societies. They say they need a strong, precise, compelling national drive. Lead the pack. Go stronger, say Emma McKern. The testimony of Australian bushfire survivor Joe Dodds in Glasgow, in the name of all the victims, and the thousands of heroic voluntary firefighters who have paid such a high price during the last bushfires. The calls of Mike Cannon-Brooks, Andrew Forrest, Matt Keane, together with hundreds of young and not so young farmers, entrepreneurs, NGOs these last weeks, hint at the desirable direction. Glasgow can only be a success if all our countries are pulling their weight together, without hesitation, without ambiguity. It is an historical responsibility, and it's happening just now. For the richest nation, and among them, for the richest and largest contributors of emissions per capita. The US, Japan, the UK, the EU have shown the path by all strongly increasing their already strong commitments. New Zealand just joined. The time for prevarication has ended, except if one is to become, and willingly, an accidental ally of the remaining who resist action. According to its entrepreneurs, its scientists, its states, Australia, one of the largest emitters of CO2 per capita in the world, would be pulling its weight by committing in Glasgow to at least 45% reduction of its emission by 2030. A slight effort above the 35% it is already sure to easily reach. The Business Council of Australia says it plainly, and even says 46%. Australia could embark immediately in the necessary transformation of its economy, with concrete measures to boost innovation and entrepreneurship, jobs, becoming a world champion, a leader in the world, while attending to the undeniable needs of transition of the most vulnerable regions and sectors. Could this be a subject on which, for the greater good of ourselves, but also this region we call home, we could unite force? This is a standing offer. Glasgow must succeed. No country would benefit from a second Copenhagen. What is then the future path of the bilateral relations? Following the breach of trust caused by the attitude of this Australian government, I was recalled to Paris for in-depth consultation. I returned to Australia with two specific missions. First, to strongly defend the interest of all companies and individuals, Australian and French, who trusted the solemn promises which were made once and are now in difficult position in the concrete implementation of the decision to end the future submarine program. Second, to help redefine the terms of our bilateral relationship moving forward, considering all the consequences of the major breakdown of trust with this Australian government. President Macron spoke with Prime Minister Morrison. He took the initiative last week, and I met with Minister Payne on Monday. On both occasions, the message was shared that it is now up to the Australian government to propose tangible actions that embody the political will of Australia's highest authorities to redefine positively the basis of our bilateral relationship and to continue joint action in the Indo-Pacific. As stated publicly yesterday by President Macron, I never say never. First, because we have common values, and honestly, I was in your country in May 2018, and I will never forget what I experienced. Your country was shoulder to shoulder with us during the wars. You had soldiers with us when our freedom was at stake. We have the same values. We have to honor these common values. I think one can have disagreements. I do respect sovereign choices, but you have to respect allies and partners. And I think that what has happened is detrimental to the reputation of your country. I will so, while continuing to plead for substantial proposal, persist in fostering and developing the people-to-people exchanges, territories to territories, promoting shared values and ideas, further developing the fabric of what makes the relationship between our two countries and people unique. As I have already started for the past year, I will seize all opportunities to visit regional and urban communities, entrepreneurs, farmers, schools, and answer every invitation. There lay the beating heart of this great nation. I seize this opportunity to warmly thank the people who had reached to us immediately after the unfortunate events, to convey words of understanding, of support, solidarity and love for France. I wish I could have time to read to you some of the letters received from children, students, elders, people who have never been to Europe, as well as those missing their trips to France. We are warmly looking forward to welcoming them back to France after this long time apart, just as we hope that our fellow citizens will soon be able to rediscover the beautiful land of Australia. As one letter quoted, the Australian way is to be always honest, direct, practical, face up to hard problems with fortitude, intelligence, and courage, to get things done, even hard things, without making a fuss, and above all, stick by your mates. This is Australia as we love it, and never will stop doing so. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. President Macron said in Rome a couple of days ago, he was asked, were you lied to? And he said, I don't think I know. The Prime Minister subsequently came out and denied he'd lied. Is he lying about lying?
Dear Laura, you are describing a pattern that I cannot judge. You are the Australian. What I can tell you is two things. Was the President lied to? Yes, he was. I have several examples, and I could describe, several instances which describe that. I used it into my speech, some of them. But, I think to cut a long conversation short, I'll quote an article published this morning. Was Macron misled? Of course he was. To suggest anything less is absurd. So maybe there is a difference between misleading and lying. But, among heads of states and governments, when you mislead a friend and a lie, you lie to him.
The first question is from Andrew Tillett.
Andrew. Thank you. Thanks, Ambassador, for your welcome back to Australia, I should say, probably.
Very kind of you.
You talked about, and the President talked about, the tangible actions that Australia needs to take to get the relationship back on track. What are those sort of tangible actions, and what does the sort of the current situation mean for things like defence cooperation? You talked about the August 30 meeting. There were things in there for talking about greater joint bilateral and multilateral defence exercises, the defence posture sort of initiatives that could see more French military personnel based or deployed here to Australia. Where are those things up to, and what are the tangible actions that France is looking for?
Thank you, Andrew, for an excellent question, if I may say. The first thing is that you exactly amplify what I was saying in my speech. If we were able to consider such ambitious initiatives, and they were in particularly exemplified in the press release, the joint communiqué after the 2+2 ministerial meeting on the 30th of August, where many of those points you're mentioning were put as a result of the communiqué. It is because we had the confidence in working with Australia, because there was a hope shared on both sides to develop further a lot of new things, and it was possible, and I've said why it was possible, but also because, as the same communiqué was saying, we both underlined the importance of the future submarine program. So now the problem for us, Andrew, is to try to understand when words are meant to be what they stand for, or when it is a lie. Yes, we had an ambitious policy, in particular with Australia. Yes, we wanted to do a lot of things, and please, for the one who have not read this communiqué, go back to see this communiqué. It was widely acclaimed and celebrated, especially by think tanks and experts, as a very ambitious outcome. This is the size and magnitude of what we were considering, without mentioning even other things which we never speak about. But the problem is of trust and truth. Where do we stand today? So to answer to your question, we will always stand with Australia and for Australia. We will always be loyal friends of Australia. I'm wearing this emblem, which is the French equivalent of the poppy, because we celebrate each year, starting from the 1st of November, the memory of all the friends from all over the world who fought with us in a key moment of our history. We remember them, we remember in particular the Australians. But it is up to the Australian government to tell us today what they mean when they say that they are sincere. Why did they lie one day, and now what can they propose? You know, it is not up to us. We respect the sovereign decision of Australia. It's not up to us to decide what Australia wants to propose. It's up to Australia. So the call to the Australian government is, please be ambitious. Please make strong, substantial proposals. But now, with experience, we won't anymore buy on cheap words. We won't buy on promises of love. You know, love is good. Having proofs of love is much better. So, at the same time, you know, this is a golden opportunity. We can rebuild something substantial, but we start from very far away, unfortunately.
The next question is from Ben Packham.
Your Excellency.
Hello, Ben.
Thank you for your speech. A few days ago, the Prime Minister said that the attack-class submarines would have been obsolete as soon as they hit the water. Is that the truth or a lie? And secondly, just if I may, it took 5 years to get to the point where we are, or where we arrived at, where the submarine was ready to proceed to the next stage and beyond or into a detailed design phase. Do you accept that if Naval Group was easier to work with, that we might not be in this position that we are now?
Thank you, Ben. You are always a very frank and straightforward person. And I gladly welcome that. No point for me in hiding into pretense or deceits. First thing, 2038, where does it come from? From which planet? When was it ever mentioned? You know, I don't engage into a discussion with the Prime Minister. I have too much respect for the head of state. But, you know, I will more humbly go to the specialist, the one who were not consulted, you know, the one who know how to build a submarine. To my knowledge, even when grilled in the Senate, this date was never mentioned. To my knowledge, when they are grilled in the Senate, they said that the program was compliant, on time and on budget. To my knowledge, the program has always been called officially by the specialist a regional superior submarine. So I would tend to think that the specialists do know maybe better, but maybe their advice has not been sent to the levels where it could be read, and so this might eventually explain some confusions in dates and details. Pretending that such submarines would be obsolete in 2038. This is exactly the same submarine we are producing currently for our national defense forces. This is a
Conventional one.
But what it means, the hull, the capacity, the lethality, everything is the same. So do you think we would engage into a program producing submarines for our own national defense if it was to be conceivable that it would be obsolete very soon? No, this is not true. But you have yourself made a comparison and a possible characterization of what was said. It's your judgment. I just humbly go towards the specialists, what they constantly said over the years. Concerning Naval Group, was it difficult to work with it? You know, I think you should worry when it's too easy, because at the end, you foot the bill. Maybe we should one day, but not in public, discuss another program. You know, maybe it was easy, but it cost 10 billion. It cost blowout. Thank you.
The next question is from Sarah Eisen.
Being a hard partner, being somebody who discusses seriously about things, is a sign of credibility and dedication. You don't easily engage into major things like those ones if you're not convinced. You progress with your partner by having an active discussion. Easy discussions is just when either you don't care or when you don't know. So I think France cared and knew, and its partners in the Commonwealth cared and knew. Those discussions was really good discussions. And once again, I come back on this. I really thank the people of the Commonwealth. They have done a great job, always defending the interests of Australia, and that it's absolutely normal. And thanks to great people of Naval Group also. There are 300 Australian employees who are now stranded in Adelaide. They've done the best job possible to really help Australia get the best, and in particular get a sovereign national industry. I'm amazed to see that this mention has completely disappeared. Why was it important that suddenly is no more? When reading your expertise, what do I see? You know, the decision which was made, if it has two clear consequences. The first one is it scrapped a program that was ready to deliver. The second is that you confide your sovereignty in others' hands. I say others because we don't know who. Is it viable? Is it sustainable? Is it adapted to the situation of Australia and the future of the region? You are the Australians. You are the best person to decide. But those are valid questions. Sorry.
It's okay. Sarah Eisen from the West Australian. Just on the importance of words, there's obviously been a war of words between the leaders of our two countries for a little while now. Do you think an apology from the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, would go some way to repairing this? It's been now, the tension has been rising for a few days. Do you think he needs to come out and say, look, I'm sorry for the way things were handled and how this has all gone down? Or is that not really important at this point?
I tell you, I will refrain from giving, especially in public, an advice to the Prime Minister. But I'll make two remarks. Out of respect for you, the press. The first one is make a comparison. Look at the depth, the quality, the level of the discussion which have happened with our great historical ally, the US. See how it did develop, at which level the subject was taken, what were the signs given on both sides, and the result in terms of strong understanding. This is what you achieve when you don't have only a short memory, but a long-term memory. The US do remember, despite their superiority in terms of armament, etc., that France was always the strongest, staunchest ally through whatever the events of the world. And as President Biden said, we were on their side and decisively make it possible for the United States to exist when it mattered. This plus many other things. Taking care in your decisions of, what it entails, not only in terms of immediate consequences or satisfactions, but also what it entails for the long-term relationship. We think, our American friends and us think that it's worth, even sometimes it's your share of humble pie. My second remark is eating one's share of humble pie might sometimes be difficult. It's up to everyone to make his own decision. Fundamentally, there is no shame for a leader to act in the best interest of its countries. If the relation between the two countries is so important, ways, words, and initiatives will be found. If it is not, if short term is better, this is a sovereign decision also.
Thank you. Could I just chase that up, Ambassador? Has President Biden eaten enough humble pie, given the revelations that apparently the US and the UK were also in on the secret, that the French were not going to be told about AUKUS until the day beforehand?
But why do you want me, being not the ambassador to the US, compare with the US, except to look at what are the results? Fundamentally, what you say, Laura, doesn't mean that what was discussed with the American was not far-reaching. Doesn't mean that we sometimes disagree, even strongly on certain issues. Doesn't mean that the Americans have not also their interests, that we have our interests. But what is important is that we have found again the path to acting together. We have found again the path to fight the right fights. The one we are fighting today, for example, in Glasgow. See how impressive the record of the US is. Yes, they have problems at home, delivering on certain aspects. But they try and they lead by example. And that is extremely important. And that's exactly what we also commit. See what we are discussing with our American friends and allies about not only this region, which is key, but also towards the rest of the world. We take action. We immediately announce frank and concrete actions. And this is what matters. The question is not as such to eat a piece of humble pie or not. A signal was given. And this signal states very clearly the alliance and the friendship between France and the US is a solid one for still centuries to come. Now the question for me as an ambassador here is, what is the choice of Australia? What does Australia prefer? What does Australia want? Maybe the choice, was to say, okay, we don't want to talk with you anymore. Maybe. But what I wanted also to convey to you today, what was the most important, was this was not a commercial contract. This was not about merchandise. It was about an agreement, an alliance that was solemnly, agreed upon, even going through Parliament, where France and Australia would commit on essential things, including on secret, highly classified things. What was at the core of the agreement, one aspect of which being submarines, was sovereignty. What was the core of the agreement was confidence in one another. We were building for 50 years together. The commitments were taken officially and unofficially. So you can judge now why and if we were justified in our reaction. Wasn't it something so solemn, so essential, that we could justifiably react the way we did react? We are not the one who started any war of anything. We remember, I said it plainly, we absolutely remember, value and cherish the relation we have with Australia, with the Australians. Those letters, I could read excerpts of some of them to you, if you so wish, are very clear in the commitment of the people, the commitment of Australia and France, one with the other. The problem is, when you have allies, you don't treat them bad. And this is exactly what has happened. So I want to insist on that. The way we have done the things, and now the things have been done together with our American partners, yes, is exemplary. And I think now we are building for the future. And we are looking forward to also build for the future with Australia. If Australia so wishes, if Australia has its ambition, but we can't work and we can speak in the names of the Australians.
Next question is from Anthony Galloway.
Thank you for your
Hello,
speech.
Anthony.
Hello, thank you for your
Thank
speech.
you for the excellent job done by this Sydney Morning Herald. Thanks to you, we discovered all the treason in the making.
I'm sure we weren't the only ones.
But you were well informed.
Oh, thank you.
One day you'll tell us by who.
I was wondering if I could ask, when the project was announced in 2016, there was a commitment from both governments to achieve 90% local content. This was never put in the strategic partnering agreement, and this was later lowered to 60%. Did France, in fact, mislead Australia in any way that it was possible to achieve 90%? And just secondly, some text messages from your president made their way into Australian media this week. What is your reaction to that? Has France lodged any complaints about private text messages being leaked in that way?
The third thing, Anthony, is about the 90%. Do you know any program here in this country which has 90% local content? If yes, please tell me. I would be gladly looking into it. Second, who said that? Maybe there were some press release, enthusiastic comment, but in no way, at no time, this was part of any signed documents where we committed upon. The only commitment that was taken there, and it was a reasonable commitment. You don't create a national sovereign industry from scratch, immediately with 100% of national resources. You need to get the best of what we can get from everywhere, not only from France, from other countries, in order to build it. So 90% was never a sensible figure. But the commitment was to maximize. And when there were questions asked about this, we proposed that it would be maximized at the level of 60%. And not only to propose it, a nice figure, but to enter into a discussion about a legally binding agreement. A legally binding agreement that was setting targets, that was setting reviewing methods, that was setting, constant evaluation of where we do like, and more important, because having an agreement, as you see, is not that much important in this country, having also penalties in case this wouldn't have been achieved. It was belt and braces. It is the first time ever in this country, and I ask anybody to raise his hands if he knows the contrary, that such a commitment was taken. No other contract in this country does secure such a high level of return for the Australian industry. So instead of speaking of what might have been, let's speak of what was in reality there. Those were thousands of jobs. They have vanished. That's the first thing. The second thing concerning the leaks. This is an unprecedented new law in terms of how to proceed, and also in terms of truth and trust. You don't behave like this on personal exchanges of leaders who are allies. But maybe it's just a confirmation that we were never seen as an ally. But doing so also sends a very worrying signal for all heads of states. Beware. In Australia, there will be leaks. And what you say in confidence to your partners will be eventually used and weaponized against you one day. At the same time, I'll tell you, there is something interesting in these leaks. It completely demonstrates that until the last minute, we didn't know where things were heading to. It completely demonstrates that nothing has ever been told to us. It completely demonstrates that we were concerned by all the questions that we were regularly addressed and tried to address in order to make the program work as it was required from us. Remember, after the meeting of President Macron and the Prime Minister in Paris, what was said by the Prime Minister? I told the President that we have a change of mind. No, he said, we've made strong progress in the implementation of the future submarine program. I thank the President for having taken very seriously this matter and having made it big progress. So, the way it was done is a new law. The way it was done doesn't go in the direction of building confidence. Those leaks are not the concrete actions we are looking for. But if it is Australia's answer, it is sad. But once again, I don't say it is Australia's answer. If it is this Australian government answer, it is sad. But we will not consider that this is the way Australia likes to react and the way that Australia do behave.
The next question is from Stephen Jegitz.
Hi, Ambassador. Thanks for your speech, and it's good to see you back in the country. Can I just ask briefly, 2 rounds of the Australia-EU FTA have now been delayed, or 1 round rather has been pushed back twice. Now, the EU, as far as I can tell, has never given a concrete reason for this delay. Australian officials are assuming it's connected to the decision on submarines. Are you able to provide any or shed any light on this? Is France continuing to press the EU to push back the talks? When do you think they can likely resume? And what message are you sending Australia through these actions?
The first thing, Stephanie, is you probably know, but I'll say it for everybody because it's important. It's to remember how European institutions do work. On trade matters, the European Commission negotiates on behalf of the European Union. It receives a mandate and it acts upon this mandate. So we have no reason to interfere with this mandate. And if we were willing to interfere with this mandate and with the, this responsibility of the Commission, I think it would create a rebuke. So fundamentally, those decisions have been taken in light and consideration of the interest of the matter by the Commission and its appreciation of where the negotiations were going. But what I like at the same time to say is that you're right to say that this was not only a question between France and Australia. The signal by this decision to scrap in an abrupt way our structuring cooperation with one important member state of the EU, the one leading, so that there would be a European Indo-Pacific strategy with some key partners like Germany, like the Netherlands in particular. The way this was handled, the message it sent across, had a strong resonance within the EU. And I'll quote the President of the Commission when she said, one of our member states has been treated in a way that is not acceptable. So we want to know what happened and why. That's my first element of my discussion. Third, which is equally important, when you discuss a free trade agreement with a country, you take two things into consideration, at least in the EU. First, the interest of the matter itself, where it can provide interesting developments for both sides, but also the quality of the signature of your partner. The second, you take into consideration the mandate that was provided to you, because it's very important. Those free trade agreements do go later through the European Parliament. And the European Parliament is a democratic voice that will sanction or not a free trade agreement. Sometimes have been refused. And there is one very important element of the mandate on the free trade agreement with Australia, which is climate and climate commitments. It's not new. It doesn't date from Glasgow yesterday. It dates from the start of the negotiations. And let's be frank, there will not be a negotiation where the EU will accept to make this substantial element disappear. Others might do, but not the EU. But we are very confident this is a subject on which, together with Australia, we can reach an agreement, because we've seen it. There is a potential in this country of doing great things on climate change. There is a great potential for this country to become an international leader on climate change solutions. There is a great potential of things that can be achieved. I quoted it in my speech. It's impressive to see what is being done at state levels, individuals, companies. There is a huge amount of energy that just needs the right direction and the right support. So I will end to a very positive note. I'm sure that at one stage we can reach an agreement.
Thanks. We've got two questions left. Kim Bergman.
Merci pour le discours.
Merci beaucoup à vous.
Ambassador, I'd like to ask you about actually another defence project that predates the submarine but has some similar features, and that's of the European Tiger helicopter by Airbus, which has a great deal of French high technology content in it. Australia has decided to retire it early and instead spend $5 billion buying a very similar US helicopter. Do you think this could be evidence of some sort of desire on our part to return to the comfort of the Anglosphere?
You say it. Just want to point some elements. Today's serviceability of the Tiger helicopter for the Army is 65%, which is absolutely normal and even a very good mark. When you have limited fleets, you always have helicopters who are not available because they are on service. So a rate of 2/3 of availability is very high. Second, the Tiger is, despite some communication that you see sometimes, you know, what we say in France, I think you probably say it is also here. When you want to kill your dog, you say it has rabies. communication sometimes indicates what you want to do with your dog, and that you're considered as a dog. Contrary to some communication, the tiger is fully combat proven. It has operated in Libya in combat circumstances. It has operated in Mali with incredible results. The Tiger is also fully interoperable with US assets as it is fitted from the beginning, including with, for example, US radio. So, I'm just made aware that the Australian Army has just deployed a pair of its Tigers to use the US to take part in an exercise in California, exercise Griffin Eagle. So, yes, it came to us as a surprise of this decision, because first it entails a huge cost for the Australian taxpayer. 5 billion. It's not, it's not the size of my salary by a galaxy size. And second, because it offers
you